In this video, I am on page 24 of the textbook. And this is a social studies passage. I want to point out to you that even though this is a reading course, you are learning skills that will help you read in any subject. So you're learning strategies that will help you in social studies, in science, even in math. So when you go to take a test, you will have the benefit of these reading skills regardless of what you're reading. And I think that's important to realize that you can apply these skills on the job. You can apply them on an academic test. If you're going on to college or to vocational training, you will use these skills. Okay, in this particular situation, we have two passages and a photo. Now, I have pulled both passages out separately, and I have also pulled out the photo because those graphics are very important. All right, so let's look at passage 1. All of this is on page 24. But let's see what this passage is about. It has 3 paragraphs, and I'm going to read it before I try to diagram it. In 1848, a man named James Marshall started the California Gold Rush. Americans rushed to California as fast as they could. Some people traveled across the country by wagon. The Oregon-California Trail took 3 to 7 months. Others traveled by steamship around the tip of South America. That trip took 2 to 3 months. Some people made a fortune in the gold fields. Others made their fortunes by offering services to gold miners. They charged high prices for those services. According to historical accounts, a slice of bread cost $1. That would equal $28 today. Buttered bread costs $2. In today's prices, a dozen eggs would have cost $90. A pound of coffee would have been $1,500. A pair of boots went for $3,000. Some businesses that started during the gold rush are still around today. Levi Strauss sold miners tough clothing to work in. People today still wear Levi's denim jeans. Henry Wells and William Fargo became millionaires after they set up a bank in San Francisco. Wells Fargo banks are still open today. Okay, let me diagram this story just in my own words. I am not concerned about grammar. I am not concerned about anything but making sense of this passage. So I'm going to put a box like this, and then I'm going to make 3 boxes under there for my paragraphs. Now I'm going to go at this one a little bit differently. I'm going to fill in the details first. So these boxes at the bottom that I didn't do very well drawing, those are going to come first. So in the first paragraph, let's see what it says. It gives me a number. I'm always interested in numbers. It gives me a name, James Marshall, and it gives me an event. So those are important pieces of information. It tells me that Americans rushed to California as fast as they could. They went by wagon, 3 to 7 months, and others travel by steamship, 2 to 3 months. So let's pull those details down here. We're talking about 1848, James Marshall, and the California Gold Rush. These folks were heading to California, either by wagon, which was a very long trip in most cases, and by steamship. If you went by wagon, you had the Native Americans to worry about. But if you were moving a whole family, the wagon was probably a better option than the steamship. Which of these do you think was more expensive, the wagon or the steamship? Now, this passage doesn't tell us, but I would bet on the steamship because the trip was shorter. It also involved a trip around South America, so it was a long trip. But I can't promise you that that's true. I'm just making an assumption there. So this is the first paragraph. Let's see what the second paragraph tells us. Some people made a fortune in the gold fields. So some people dug up gold and made a fortune. Others made fortunes by offering services to gold miners. They sold food. Buttered bread was double the price. A dozen eggs, so they had a food service. They knew that the miners could not survive without food and without clothing, so they had a pair of boots that went for, by today's standards, $3,000. So this is talking about fortunes that were made. You could dig up gold. That was one way to make a fortune. If you dug up a gold nugget or found it in a stream, you could pay $3,000 for a pair of boots. So there were some serious fortunes made. The other way, the more enterprising way, was through services. So there was a food service, clothing. Now keep in mind, you couldn't just run down to Walmart and buy what you needed. These were very specialized stores, and they could really charge whatever they wanted. So that was about the fortunes that were made. Last but not least, some businesses that started during the gold rush are still around today. Levi Strauss, of course, we associate that with Levi's jeans. Wells and Fargo became millionaires after they set up a bank in San Francisco, and those banks are still open today. So this is talking about some businesses that have survived since 1848. Levi Strauss. And why would it be important to set up a bank? Why would they need a big bank in this time? Because those folks who were digging up gold needed somewhere to keep it. People were trying to steal it, so they needed a secure place to keep it. Can you imagine being the Wells Fargo people who set up the first bank? How dangerous that would be. Okay, so let's back up and get our main idea. First, going to get my topic. What is this story about in 3 words? It's about the California gold rush. And you notice that the author capitalizes California gold rush. So that is all one event. So I want to keep all of that together when I name my topic. So what about it? What about the California gold rush? Well, I'm going to say in 1848, the California gold rush was a difficult trip. I'm paraphrasing. I'm putting it in my own words. This is a skill that takes a lot of practice, and I'm not the best at it. This is not a math problem, so this is not my forte. But it gets better with practice. The California Gold Rush was a difficult trip, but fortunes were made. And businesses established. Okay, I don't have room to write established in there, so I'm going to use a synonym. Businesses built. Remember, this is for your information only. Whatever you want to say is fine. Okay, let's look at passage 2. When gold was discovered at Sutter's Mill, the news spread quickly. The California Gold Rush was on. People wanted to make their fortune. More than 300,000 people traveled to the state. The people came from different places, and they had different backgrounds. Before the gold rush, most of the 160,000 people who lived in California were Native Americans. They lived in small villages. They hunted and gathered. They lived off resources on the land and in the water. The new miners had a different use for the land and water. They wanted only to find gold. Their search for gold destroyed resources. As a result, the Native American population declined. During the gold rush, California was a free state. Slavery was not allowed. That did not stop some Southern slave owners. They brought slaves to work the gold fields. Free blacks from the northern states made their way to California too. California was a free state, but it did not give rights to African Americans or Native Americans. Okay, that last diagram seemed to work pretty well, so let's just try that again. I'll make a space for my topic. I liked the strategy of filling that part in last because I really need to understand the passage before I can make the determination about main idea. Now, there are a lot of different structures going on here. This is an advanced passage. This is not a basic skills passage. But let's take a look. Let's break it down. It tells me where gold was discovered. I can infer that Sutter's Mill was in California. More than 300,000 people traveled. That's like 3 Neyland stadiums full of people, a little bit less than that. The people came from different places, and they had different backgrounds. And we'll look at why that's important. So we know that this happened in Sutter's Mill, California. It's a very interesting story. If you've never read the story of Sutter's Mill, Google it and read that. It's pretty interesting. So 300,000, let me not do it. I was going to write 300,000 plus, but let's use the mathematical way of doing that. Greater than 300,000 people traveled to California. Now imagine those poor Native Americans that lived there, and then all of these people start coming in droves into your it wasn't a state, it was your land. They came into your area. They looked different. They were from different places, and they had different backgrounds. Some of them were coming from southern plantations. They were very wealthy people who were looking for even more money. Some people had nothing at all. They were coming to find a fortune. You had different races of people. So the Native Americans who lived there were being introduced to people they had never seen before in some situations. So before the gold rush, there were about 160,000 people who lived there, and they were Native Americans. They lived in small villages. They hunted and gathered. They lived off resources on the land and water. But then we switch to the new miners. So this is a compare and contrast kind of thing. They had a different use for the land and water. They only wanted gold. And in the process of finding it, they destroyed land and water. And then we have a cause and effect happening as well. So this passage has, even just this paragraph, has a lot of text structure. As a result, there's an effect. The Native American population declined. So this is a cause and effect situation. The yellow and orange or salmon color, that is a compare-contrast situation. So to do this one, because we do have comparing and contrasting, I'm going to draw a Venn diagram. Let me try that again because I'm going to need all the space I can get here. So there's that one. Let's try taking a screenshot. It's coming back to me. Okay, so let's compare the Native Americans to the miners. First of all, we can look at the number of Native Americans. So there were 160,000 Native Americans as opposed to more than 300,000 miners. That's a pretty big difference. If it came down to it, the miners outnumbered the Native Americans. Okay, the Native Americans lived in small villages. And I know from experience that the miners lived in camps, but I don't have that in this passage, so I'm not going to put it down here. The natives were hunters. They hunted wild game. They also gathered fruits, nuts, berries, plants. They lived off resources, so they lived off the land. I'll tell you what, I'm going to bullet point these just to help me keep all that straight. And they used the water. They lived off the water. They didn't abuse Mother Nature. The miners, on the other hand, only wanted gold. They didn't care about the lands or the water. They actually destroyed natural resources. When they moved into the streams to look for gold, they polluted the streams. They tore down trees. They destroyed the lands. But they only cared about the gold. Now, what is the thing that these two groups had in common? How were they alike? It's pretty basic. They both needed what? The land. Okay. So let's look at the end result. Let's look at the effect. There were more miners that only cared about gold. So the effect of that was a decrease in the Native American population. That population got smaller. There's a lot in that second paragraph, a lot of different text structures. Okay, last paragraph here. During the gold rush, California was a free state. Now let's stop just a minute and think about what that means. This was pre-Civil War, 1848. So California was a state in which you could not own slaves. That's what this means. Slavery was not allowed. But some of the southern slave owners brought slaves to work the fields. They didn't care what the rule was. And then you had free black people from the northern states coming in too. So California was a free state, but it did not give rights to African Americans or Native Americans. So let's break this down. We know that California was a free state. And we know that that means that slavery was not allowed. It was not legal. So the southern migrants to California brought slaves. They disregarded the law, which caused problems naturally. The northern states did not, the northern territories did not have slaves. It was not legal in the north. But the northern states had free black citizens that came to. And I told you just a minute ago that these were not states. I have no idea what I'm thinking. If it was pre-Civil War, these most certainly were states. Colonies became states in the 1700s. I've got my dates all mixed up, and I apologize. It just dawned on me what I said, and I was wrong. It's very late, and I'm very tired, but that's no excuse. So California was a free state, but California did not, I always find this interesting, give rights to minority groups. So that's one of the key takeaways for me when I read this passage, is that even though it was a free state, it really wasn't. The second takeaway that I get here is that minority groups were present and accounted for in California. So you had the miners who were coming in, but you also had a diverse population with the Native Americans, the African Americans, people of all nationalities were coming to California. So again, the topic, we could say the California Gold Rush, but there's a little bit more there. The California Gold Rush had, let's call it the California Gold Rush's effect on population. This is really focusing on the people who lived in the area. It talks about the people who came to the area. The Native American population decreased. You also had black citizens moving into the area, either by Southern slave owners or by Northern free black citizens. So here's the main idea. I'm not even going to write that. The California Gold Rush changed the makeup, you could also say the characteristics, the demographics. The California Gold Rush changed the makeup of California's population. California is still a very diverse state. You have citizens from all over the world who come to California because of its geographical location and also because of its history. Okay, so we have two passages that we have diagrammed, and we have a good handle on this story. Let's look at this picture just a second, because I want you to notice some things in this picture. Let's come up with a topic. And again, you could say the California Gold Rush, but that's too broad. What is happening in this picture? It is travel in the California Gold Rush. So what can we infer about the travel? At least this is travel across land. How would you describe what you see in that picture? The guys are carrying a shovel and a frying pan. They're all carrying shovels and pickaxes. That poor donkey or burro is loaded to the gills. He has buckets and bags and all kinds of stuff. The people in the back are helping the wagon, which has wooden wheels. And look at the terrain. Look at what they're traveling through. These are not paved interstates. So I'm saying that travel, let's call it land travel. This is another thing that makes me think the steamship was probably expensive. Land travel in the California Gold Rush was hard. There's no way that is easy that I'm looking at. And difficult. Actually, hard and difficult are the same thing. Hard and dangerous. If one of those oxen pulling that wagon were to fall, or if the wheel broke on the wagon, or if a Native American hit that wagon cover with an arrow that's burning, that's dangerous. So I can look at that picture and tell you that that was not for me. 3 to 7 months. Can you imagine being, if you're a female, can you imagine being a woman who's about to have a baby? You could be traveling the whole length of your pregnancy almost. Or you could have a baby on the wagon train. Life was not easy for these people. But they were determined to get to the west to find gold. Okay, let's tackle our questions. And I'm going to try to pull, if you'll bear with me just a second, I'm going to pull this diagram. Hopefully you have yours in a notebook where you don't have to flip back and forth. You can just kind of, I'm not going to do this for the picture because I think it's pretty clear what it's showing us. but we can always look back if we need to. So let's bring this over. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. This thing's touchy today. It wants me to do things exactly right. Okay, there are our two diagrams, and then we know about our picture. So, number 4. This is continuing from the questions in the previous section. Which best describes the point of view of the author of passage 1? Now remember, the passage 1, it says the gold rush was difficult, but fortunes were made and businesses were built. So let's see here. The author believes the gold rush led to disappointment for those who did not get rich. The author believes the gold rush caused the cost of goods to go up across the country. Well, it didn't say anything about the area other than California, so I'm going to eliminate that one. The author believes the gold rush provided opportunities to make money and build businesses. Fortunes were made and businesses were built. The author believes the gold rush helped the way people traveled across the country. That was not mentioned. Nor was it mentioned about people who did not get rich. It didn't talk about those people. This one matches my answer almost exactly. Fortunes were made and businesses were built. So the answer is C. Which best describes the point of view of the author of passage 2? Okay, this is the one that focuses on the building of the society, the destruction of the Native American areas. So let's look at our choices. The author believes that the gold rush has benefited many different types of people. The author believes that white miners did not affect the lives of Native Americans. That is just flat out false. Because of white miners, the population of Native Americans did what? Decreased. Okay, I'm not getting that nice snap to shape that I want. I'm sorry. Okay. The author believes that the miners took care to preserve natural resources during the gold rush. No, they said that they destroyed it. The author believes that Native Americans and African Americans were not treated equally in free California. So both of these talk about different groups of people. Why is it not option A? The gold rush benefited? Did it benefit the Native Americans? No. So the answer for this one is going to be, D. How are the points of view of the authors similar? This is compare, contrast. We won't draw a Venn diagram, but if we did, here's what we're looking for. Oops, that's huge. If we drew the Venn, we're looking for this area. How would they agree on something? Both authors focus on the changes caused by the California gold rush. That's true. The first one talked about financial things. The second one talked about population things. Both authors wish they had been alive during the gold rush. Nobody said anything to that effect. Both authors believe that the California gold rush improved life for most people. I think the first author did, but definitely not the second. The Native Americans did not get a good deal, nor the Southern slaves. Both authors share facts about how much goods cost during the California Gold Rush. The first author did, but not the second one. So we are looking at A on this one. What did they both do? And then in number 7, we're looking at how are the points of view different. Number 1 has a positive view of the effect of the gold rush, while number 2 is neutral and presents facts. Well, that word neutral bothers me because neutral means that it's not good or bad. It's just facts. But this is not true because number 2 talked about the bad. That is not being neutral. So I'm going to eliminate A. The author of number 1 has a negative view, while the author of number 2 is neutral. Again, number 2 is not neutral, and number 1 actually had a positive view. Talked about fortunes and businesses. So that's not the one I want. Author 1 has a more negative view. No, author 1 had a more positive view. The author of 1 has a more positive view than the author of passage 2. That is the true one. Author number 1 talked about fortunes and businesses. Those are good things. Author number 2 talked about a dying population and mistreatment of black citizens. Those are bad things. Oh my goodness, this was a long passage, but we got through it. Okay, in the next one, we will be looking at another lesson. So we actually start lesson 10 next time. So I'll see you in that video, and I hope you have a really good day. Bye-bye.